All right, let's talk about Erwin Schrödinger. You know, the guy with the cat, the one that's somehow both dead and alive? Well, today we're going to unpack that story. And trust me, the real man, his science, and his legacy, they're way more entangled than you can possibly imagine. So, is the cat dead or alive, right? We've all heard it. It's become this go-to phrase for anything kind of weird or up in the air. But here's the kicker. The story isn't actually about the cat. Not really. It was Schrödinger's way of poking a huge hole in a quantum idea he thought was, frankly, completely ridiculous.
Okay, so what was this big idea he hated so much? It's called superposition. The main theory back then, the Copenhagen interpretation, basically said that tiny little particles, like an atom, exist in all their possible states at once. It's kind of like a blurry cloud of possibilities, and it only snaps into one single reality when we look at it. Yeah, Schrödinger thought this was just bonkers. He was worried this quantum weirdness could escape the tiny world of atoms and start infecting our big normal world.
So, to prove how absurd he thought this was, he came up with his infernal device. You gotta understand, this was never meant to be a real experiment. It was pure sarcasm. He was basically saying, oh yeah? Well, if your theory is right, let's connect that tiny, fuzzy atom to a cat. Now, until we look, the atom is both decayed and not decayed, which means the cat is both dead and alive. See? He was trying to show them, your theory leads to this impossible conclusion. It's broken. Okay, so how did he even get to this point? I mean, arguing with the biggest names in physics? To really get the paradox, we have to rewind a bit and look at the man himself and the incredible science that put him on the map in the first place.
Schrödinger's story starts in Vienna. He grew up in this really intellectual bilingual family, which probably explains why his mind was always jumping between different subjects. He just refused to stick to one thing. But the real magic happened in 1926. He's in Zurich, and he has what's called an annus mirabilis, a miraculous year. And it's no exaggeration. What he did that year literally changed physics forever.
You see, at the time, physics was kind of stuck. The old model of the atom, you know, the one with electrons jumping around in these fixed orbits, it was falling apart. It was just clunky, incomplete, and didn't really explain a lot of things. Physics was desperate for a new idea, a fresh start, and Schrödinger, who was really inspired by this wild theory of matter waves from Louis de Broglie, he was the one who was about to deliver it.
And bam! This was it. The revolution, the Schrödinger equation. It was a total game changer because it stopped describing the electron as a little particle zipping around. Instead, it described it as a wave. And suddenly, those weird energy levels weren't just random jumps anymore. They were like the natural notes on a guitar string, the beautiful resonant frequencies of that wave. It was so elegant, so powerful, and yeah, it deservedly won him the Nobel Prize in 1933.
So, Nobel Prize-winning physicist, right? You'd think that's his story. But nope. Just when you think you've got this guy figured out, he does a complete 180. He takes that brilliant quantum mind of his and points it at one of the biggest questions there is. What is life?
So this is during World War II. He had to flee the Nazis, and he ends up in Dublin. And while he's there, he gives these lectures that eventually become this incredibly influential book, What is Life? Now think about this. At the time, no one had a clue what a gene was physically made of. But Schrödinger came at it from a totally different angle, from physics, and he had this flash of genius.
He basically said, look, whatever holds the blueprint for life, it can't be a simple, boring crystal, like salt, where everything just repeats. There's not enough information there. It has to be something he called an aperiodic crystal, a crystal that doesn't repeat, something complex and irregular, capable of storing a massive amount of information. He literally called it a code script. And the effect this had, it was staggering. You've heard of Watson and Crick, right? The guys who discovered the structure of DNA? They read his book, and that idea of a code script was a light bulb moment. They realized that's what they were looking for. So this quantum physicist, with one little book, basically helped kickstart the entire field of molecular biology. It's just wow.
Okay, so we've got the Nobel Prize winner, the visionary who helped inspire the discovery of DNA. But there's another side to this story, a much darker side. And it's one that's really only come to light in recent years, thanks to his own diaries and historical records. And there's really no way to soften this. The historical record is clear because he wrote about it himself. He had a documented history of predatory behavior, specifically grooming and abusing minors. The case of Ethan Junger, who was just a teenager, is one of the most disturbing. It was a horrific abuse of his power and his position. and it had devastating, lifelong consequences for her. And the records show this wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a pattern.
So now, with this information out in the open, the very institutions that built him up are facing a really difficult reckoning. Trinity College in Dublin, the same place where he gave those famous What is Life lectures, they've renamed the Schrödinger Theater. They've taken down his bust. And this is happening at universities all over the world. There's this massive, painful reassessment of his legacy happening right now.
Which brings us to the core of the problem, doesn't it? How do you hold both of these things in your head at once? The brilliant, groundbreaking scientist whose ideas are literally shaping our future, and the predator. It's like his legacy itself is in a kind of superposition. Two contradictory states existing at the same time.
And this is where the irony gets almost unbelievable. Remember that cat in the box? The thought experiment he invented to show how stupid he thought quantum mechanics was? Well, today, it's the foundation for the next huge technological leap. Physicists are now actively trying to create and control what they call cat states, real macroscopic objects in a state of superposition. Yeah, his ideas are more relevant now than ever. Scientists are developing something called cat qubits, bits for quantum computers, based directly on his paradox. It's one of the most promising ways to build a quantum computer that actually works without constantly making errors. In fact, just recently, researchers managed to keep one of these cat qubits stable for over 20 seconds. That might not sound like a lot, but in the quantum world, that's an eternity. It's a huge step forward.
So this is the contradiction we're stuck with, isn't it? It's so stark. His scientific work isn't just some dusty old theory in a textbook. It's the literal foundation for future technology. And at the very same moment, the name Schrödinger, the man, is being scrubbed from the walls of our universities.
And that leaves us with a really tough, maybe even impossible question. His science is part of the fabric of our reality. His paradox isn't a paradox anymore, it's a goal. So, what's the half-life of genius when you weigh it against the damage a person does? Is it possible to separate the two? And maybe more importantly, should we even try?